This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
It's Wednesday, and that is our Millennial Round Table, and we have our regular guest in studio, and probably we'll spend a few minutes trying to find out where they've been. But first of all, Dr. Nick Pitts, you have not only been out of Dallas, you have been out of the country. Can you, in a couple of minutes, share with us all the places you've been lately?
Oh, my goodness. So I don't know, Allie, Beth, if you remember playing Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Of course I do.
And so I felt like Where in the World was Nick Pitts over the past almost 3 weeks now. So I started off in D.C. for a little bit, ran up to New York to go see Dear Evan Hansen and see some friends there, ran overseas to Italy and got to see everything from the Amalfi Coast to Florence, to take a little Vespa, rent a little Vespa and ran out to Venice, and then got a boat and went around the island of Capri, and then explored Rome a little bit, then came back to New York, then went back down to Nashville to go see the Predators. Let's go Preds.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about Stanley Cup later.
And then now I'm back in Dallas, apparently. I think I'm in Dallas. I think I'm in Dallas right now.
I understand you've got some other trips, so we'll talk about that in just a minute. But Allie Beth Stuckey also with us, and she's been out and about. And you went to an anti-Trump, well, I guess it's supposed to be a resistance rally, but it was an anti-Trump rally, didn't you?
Yes, not quite as exciting as being in Italy, but interesting nonetheless. So I went to an anti-Trump rally, honestly, just to see what it was like, and I wanted to interview people. And to be perfectly fair, I did have a fairly reasonable conversation with two women right before I talked to the Russia collusion guy. But, they wanted to march for truth, and some people even said, you know what, there could be corruption on either side of the aisle. We just want to know what's true. So that is fair. And then I stumbled upon someone who really wanted to talk to me. And so I interviewed him, and he said something without me even asking about how Trump stole the election. So started out by asking him how. Okay, he couldn't tell me. He went all the way back to 2000 during the Bush election, and something about it just started getting a little bit crazy. So I asked him, do you think Russia colluded with Trump? And he said, oh, absolutely. There's a plethora of evidence, and there are a zillion facts I could tell you. I said, okay, can you tell me one?
Yes.
Well, I'm not gonna teach you this. Okay, well, he was actually pretty condescending to me and said, well, have you been paying attention? So I said, okay, enlighten me. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to. Now, I'm not necessarily saying one way or another. I would like to know if there was Russia collusion as well. However, it just kind of points to the fact that so many people go to protest and are so passionate about something that they actually don't know anything about. They just get caught up in these vitriolic emotional arguments, and they are willing to spend their time, spend their energy, spend their money, spend their voice advocating for something that they really don't know anything about. That's dangerous no matter what side of the aisle that you're on. So I learned a lot.
Yes, well, for sure. Again, we have a link both to Nick Pitts, of course, is the Director of Cultural Engagement for the Denison Forum, and I have my Denison file here just full of material from Jim Denison as well as from Nick Pitts. And, of course, we have a link to Allie Beth's conservative millennial websites, and I say websites because you can see you on Instagram and on web pages as well as on Facebook.
Yep.
And that interview is a fascinating interview because I was waiting for him to come up with something. Then finally goes to the camera and says, well, I'll write it. I'll send it. So we're still waiting for those.
I never got an email. I was kind of hoping that I would get some kind of email.
Give me something.
No, I didn't. I think I honestly could have come up with something more than he did. I mean, I've watched enough news to hear at least what the liberal media is saying about it, but he couldn't even come up with one talking point. It was kind of sad.
I used to do debates on college campus. Norm Geisler and I would do those. He'd talk me into them. And there would be some times where the person on the other side was so poor, I'd say, okay, here's the argument he would have given you, and here's my answer. Because they couldn't even sometimes get their argument out. You know?
So let me just play both sides here.
Let me explain what he should have said, but still I have an answer for that. A very good one, by the way. But at least sometimes they would get so rattled they would forget about what they were even going to try to say. Yep. And that's what that sort of struck me as I was watching you. You're really a gutsy woman to go in there and talk to a few of those people.
Well, shout out to my husband. He was there. A lot of people don't know that, but he was behind the camera.
There we go.
So I felt more safe than if I was just by myself.
Pretty fun. Well, those just to give you a little bit of an idea, and if you're just joining us, this has been something we've done on a regular basis, and we'll continue to do so. Allie Beth Stuckey and Dr. Nick Pitts with us. And I thought just before we take our first break, let's talk about tomorrow. the major networks have decided that they're going to pull away from The Price is Right and situation comedies and soap operas and everything to cover this. Now, I'm the oldest one around the table. That happened in the 1970s during Watergate, but I don't see that it's happened too much. But they are convinced that this testimony tomorrow by James Comey is right up there with Watergate.
Yeah, so even Clapper this morning, right, came out and said that this pales in comparison to Watergate.
Boy.
And so, I can just imagine when I was a little kid, my parents would leave us at home during the summer, and I was supposed to be reading books. I was supposed to read one book a week every summer, but I would always sneak away during the 10 o'clock hour to watch The Price is Right. And I can't help but think to be one of those little kids that's home from school right now.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not going to get to see Blinko. What's going on? And I've got to watch this Comey guy.
Drew Carey, and instead you get James Comey.
The Price is Wrong, CNN. The Price is Wrong. But nevertheless, I mean, again, it's just an indicator, and it points to the fact that we're just such a politicized culture now that literally we just can't. I don't know if we can't get enough, or the media can't serve it to us fast enough. And so it's just they're force feeding us, or there's just an appetite to be able to kind of confirm our preconceived notions that really aren't based on facts, but we're substituting speculation for facts, which is just, again, so unfortunate for where we're at right now.
I can't wait for the Allie Beth videos on this, and I can't wait for the Denison Forum daily briefings on all of this.
Boy.
You both are writing about these and doing things all the time, aren't you?
Yes, and I'm really interested to see this as well. And what I've always said, whatever side of the aisle that you're on, whether you voted for Trump or you've hated Donald Trump since day one, we should all want to know the truth. And so I'm excited to see this. And I feel like people who are maybe always Trumpers or completely pro-Trump are already saying, oh, well, this is fake news. They're just trying to spin a story. Well, why don't we wait and see what he has to say is what I want to know. I think we should all want a president who is transparent, who has integrity. And if that's not the case, we should all be concerned by that. So maybe this has the potential to bring us together rather than divide us. I don't know. That might be too naive.
Again, it's just, you kind of look back at it, and like you, Allie Beth, like I really do want to come to the bottom. I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to see, was there collusion? Was there not collusion? Was there wrongdoing? Or was it simply just kind of a spun up narrative that was going to draw in viewers? But at the end of the day, what we already know right now is that the trust in institutions and with media and then with one another is just at an all-time low right now. We don't trust one another. We don't trust what we're seeing on TV. And then you've got both sides of the aisle that just have trust issues. And again, no matter what happens over the coming days, the trust issue has got to be addressed.
Well, we need to take a break, but when we come back, let's talk about some trust issues. Number one, we have potentially a new FBI director, if indeed he is confirmed. Will that increase trust? And we have, I guess, the first millennial whistleblower, Reality Lee Winner. That really is her name. Some people say winner's not a loser, but nevertheless, that's the fad joke for the day. And then the rest of the bad jokes will come probably from
me. Let's just be honest. I've been telling them I've got about 2.5 weeks worth of bad jokes saved up. So I hope they're ready, and I hope you're ready, because it's only going to get cornier from here. Consider me the leftover corn on the cob from Thanksgiving.
Oh, here we go. It's already started.
That was good. That was
already
decent.
started.
That was okay.
That was decent.
Well, anyway, we need to take a break, and we'll probably hear a lot more about the Nashville Predators before we're all done here. But we're also going to get into some of the articles we've posted as well once we get out of the news cycle. Cowards of Academia. That's Bernie Goldberg. It's been a while since we've had him on the program here. William McGurn, Why Elites Hate. And then Senator Ben Sass has some things to say. So we have a lot to cover, and we will do so right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, last month I talked about the economic woes of ESPN when the network laid off 100 people. There are economic reasons, but the more important ones are political reasons. ESPN executives and on-air talent came to the wrong conclusion about bringing political discussions into the network. It didn't improve ESPN's ratings, it made them worse. Clay Travis explained that middle America wants to pop a beer and listen to sports talk. They don't want to be lectured about why Caitlyn Jenner is a hero, Michael Sam is the new Jackie Robinson of sports, and Colin Kaepernick is the Rosa Parks of football. A recent survey validates his conclusions. The survey aggregated 43 different media markets to see the political leanings of ESPN consumers in those markets. The study found that Republicans were fleeing ESPN in droves. In the last year, the ESPN audience became 5% less Republican. ESPN2 actually became 10% less Republican, and the biggest partisan shift happened on ESPN News, whose audience became 36% less Republican. When the study came out, Clay Travis said that the results did not surprise him. Instead, he said it put to rest the liberal sports media arguments that ESPN's politics are having no impact on viewership. ESPN's ratings are down substantially in the last year, and a big reason why is the network's liberal political slant on sports stories. This study provides the needed documentation for what many already assume to be true. ESPN has been chasing off lots of viewers who merely wanted to watch their favorite sports team and get some interesting sports commentary. It wasn't a smart move to turn ESPN into MSNBC with sports added. They wanted to watch sports, not be lectured about left-wing ideology. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We've very rarely put this much material on the table so quickly, but very rarely do we already know. So there's a lot of that. Didn't you get that sense when you were talking to some of those individuals?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know we always blame the mainstream media, but if you watch the mainstream media, or if you hear even liberal politicians, if you listen to Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, Elizabeth Warren, that have all been calling for his impeachment, well, that's exactly what they do. They make these broad accusations and these very serious allegations, but they never talk about how or why. They just talk about, well, obviously there's Russian collusion. Obviously they hacked our elections. There's no way that Hillary Clinton could have lost, but they very rarely tell you how. So if that's all you're doing, if you're just watching NBC and listening to all these politicians, following them on social media, then I completely see why you think that that's a sufficient mode of argumentation, because that's what all of these leaders and politicians are doing too, unfortunately.
So in social science, it's called the stud mentality, or the stud effect, rather. But the stud effect is in reference to online dating. So there used to be a day that an individual would walk into some social setting or some bar, and he or she would experience rejection of some sort, and it would humiliate them, or it would kind of not necessarily degrade them, but it would create a humbling aspect to them so that they didn't have that confidence and bravado when they walked into the next place. And so now what's happened, though, with online dating, all you ever know is acceptance. You never know rejection, which typically has that humbling factor. And so if we apply that stud effect, that stud mentality over to kind of news media and just news consumption, well, if you're only listening to individuals that edify what you already believe to be true, and you're doing it in your own little silo, when eventually you step outside that silo in what I like to refer to as the real world, when you step outside that silo, what you encounter is dissenting voices that are contrary to some of the aspects and sources you've been reading, and you can't just sing along to that tune anymore, because that tune doesn't necessarily align with reality.
Gosh, well, I know we're not talking about college campuses right now. We're talking about Russia, but I can't help but think of how college campuses are becoming exactly like that. The stud effect, when they're creating these safe spaces. I mean, I know we're probably talking Generation X boss is not going to be as sympathetic as I thought that they should be. Are we going to see another round of protests? Are bosses going to cave to them? I'm just so interested to see how they're going to try to carry those safe spaces and that stud effect into the working world.
Yeah, so for example, I've just had to come to the reality that some people have not tasted the goodness and glory of Peeps. And so you didn't think I'd bring it back.
No, I had no idea, but I never know how he's going to end a sentence. It starts and I'm like, where is he going? And then it's completely different. So I'm used to it. So carry on.
So I've had to learn that people don't like Peeps for some strange reason.
What in the world's
I don't
going
understand.
on there?
So it's forced me to have to live and to be able to give a response for the hope that is within me, that is the goodness of Peeps.
I'm really confused. Is this a metaphor for something, or do you literally feel like just people aren't happy because they don't have Peeps?
People, I think there's a correlation that exists there. I'm not willing to do the research, but if there's a listener that wants to do the research,
I was about to say, if you agree with this, please call in, especially if you disagree. I need some backup here.
For sure. Let me come back to the point that was made just a minute ago, and that is
bring it back.
Some
Nick.
of these individuals that are on these talking head shows are using hyperbole, but I wonder if sometimes the millennial generation or individuals that don't understand this hyperbole believe it all. When Ted Kennedy went into the well of the Senate when they first put forward the nomination of Judge Robert Bork and said that this is a man that will promote back alley abortions, I don't think even the rabid Democrat believed that Robert Bork was going to end Roe versus Wade and force women to get back alley abortions, but they understood that it was sort of hyperbole. It was maybe went over the top in terms of the rhetoric. Now, though, when individuals make these statements on MSNBC, it's almost like everybody's trying to one-up themselves. And the individual that you interviewed, Allie Beth, I think he believed every single word that he had seen on some of these television shows.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that more and more. And actually, that exact example that you gave, the back alley abortions as an argument against the pro-life argument, is very prolific, especially online. Whenever I post a pro-life video, a lot of people, especially my age, will respond with almost the same exact verbatim comment. It's weird. It's like they copy and pasted it from Mother Jones or something. Mm-hmm. But they say, oh, back to back alley abortions for us. Like, that's what the pro-life movement really wants, or that's inevitable from
that's
pro-life.
What it was like pre-1973.
Right. And so I'm afraid that what was perhaps meant for hyperbole, now I don't know the motive, but what was perhaps used for hyperbole is taken literally.
Yes.
And then it's used as an argument, which can work to our benefit if we say, okay, let's break that down with some facts.
So Wall Street Journal commissioned a study yesterday. They highlighted at more than half of schools, college campuses, at least a third of seniors were unable to make a cohesive argument, assess the quality of evidence in a document, or interpret data in a table. So again, it goes back to one, the evidence that you're pointing
lack
to,
of critical thinking,
two, lack of critical thinking, and three, being able to interpret data in a table. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert in numbers, but I do understand that you have to be able to cognitively grasp what's being presented before you. And again, if you don't understand the quality of the evidence that's before you, if you're not able to put that into an argument, what do you like? I don't understand what you're going to college for, right? Because that's, again, this might just be the Twitter generation where we're really great at making a point, but we're awful at making an argument.
Yes.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that universities are totally feeding into that. I mean, you hear story after story about professors who are indoctrinating their students, especially after the election, who basically said, if you voted for Donald Trump, you're a bad person, and they got no trouble whatsoever for decrying Trump and pushing the climate change agenda, pushing the transgender agenda. Everything I feel like in college, at least that we see in the news, has become this moral argument that if you don't buy into this political agenda, then you're a bad person. And so what we get is these so-called or self-deemed vigilantes that think that they're fighting for the right side of history, and they don't have the ability to think for themselves because their teachers aren't making them think for themselves at all.
No, you're just regurgitating you're baby birds in that moment. You're regurgitating what someone has spit up into your mouth, and that's not a way to make an argument. That's just a way to make an unappealing appetite. And so I think it's just increasingly important for college students, not necessarily to be conservative, but rather just to be able to think for themselves, to cognitively wrestle with ideas, because that's what the college campus is for. It's where, again, this intellectual curiosity meets aged wisdom that's been handed down from ages on ages, and to be able to ask the questions, because at the end of the day, intelligence isn't how much you know, but it's the curiosity to ask questions as to what you don't know.
Let's take a break, and if you'd like to join us, of course, we've already got calls coming in, 1-800-351-1212. We come back, let me give you a little bit of information about who Donald Trump has tapped as his next FBI director, maybe a comment or two as well about an individual that has leaked information because of having the top security clearance, even though she urged rapper Kanye West to print T-shirts labeled "Being White is Terrorism," and has been a Bernie Sanders supporter, and also said some very awful things, which I cannot repeat according to FCC regulations on the radio about Donald Trump.
But I can, so stay. No, I'm just kidding.
So we'll see where we go on that. And, I will be in Florida in a week, and Al Gore said that on this interview on Fox the other day that there are fish swimming in the streets of downtown Miami because the sea levels have risen so much.
That might be the only way I can catch fish right now. I haven't been fishing in a long time. I might lose my Tennessee heritage if I don't catch a fish here pretty soon.
But again, these are the kinds of things that are said at the moment. But then if somebody really believes it and they're going, I'm in South Beach here, I don't see any fish on the streets here. What's going on?
Yeah, you got to go to a seafood restaurant to see fish on the streets.
Well, let's take a break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
I'd like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll get to some of the phone calls, but of course we have around the round table here, Allie, Beth, Stuckey, as well as Dr. Nick Pitts, and we encourage your phone calls as we talk about a number of issues. The first article we'll get to in just a minute, the cowards of academia, what's happening in the academy. But just before we do that, let me at least bring some news to you, and that is we've mentioned before, but let me get into the fact that we now have an individual that has been tapped by President Donald Trump, Christopher Wray, as the next FBI director. And this is important because, of course, tomorrow we're going to have a chance to hear from James Comey in testimony. You might say, okay, tell us a little bit more about Christopher Wray. There's an individual that actually served under President George W. Bush in the Justice Department. He was the Assistant Attorney General overseeing some of the areas of the Justice Criminal Division. Before that, he'd actually been a U.S. Attorney in Georgia. He also has served under a number of different individuals, including James Comey, John Ashcroft, and Alberto Gonzales, and now is actually in private practice. So it will be interesting to see when they bring him in as a little bit of an outsider, not that much, but somewhat of an outsider since he's now in private practice, how that will go. And if there is any criticism that might surface, it is the fact that he actually served for a short period of time under New Jersey Governor Chris Christie as a lawyer, especially during the so-called Bridgegate trial. Whether that'll be a knock against him, I do not know. I'm seeing a lot of positive things said about him, and in this political environment, I don't know. Nick, it's hard to even predict anymore.
Yeah, if the past is prologue, unfortunately, I think we're in for a fight right now. We're going to see a fight right now just because, Gorsuch was a guy that received, what was it, unanimous support, or was there 3 dissenting votes or something like that? And so we know that Wray received unanimous support back in, I think, 2003 when he had to go before the Senate. And so past is prologue. I think we're in for a slog.
Yeah, probably could be. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think it's just going to be increasingly interesting to see how this is moved forward in light of just the sheer madness that's happening right now relative to Coates going before the committee today, and then what you see with Comey that's going before the committee tomorrow, and then to introduce Wray. This is politics at its very core right now. Wow. The release of him. So,
well, we mentioned Evergreen State College. Let's get to that for just a minute, and that is Bernard Goldberg. Bernie Goldberg's been on the program. It's been a while. We ought to probably have him back on again, and he talks about this particular issue. But again, he goes through the same litany that we've talked about before. Whether it's University of California at Berkeley, whether it's Charles Murray at Middlebury College in Vermont, whether it's Heather McDonald at Claremont McKenna College. But the one in Evergreen is pretty amazing because, as I mentioned the other day, we have one professor here who calls himself a liberal and progressive. You wouldn't probably be a progressive if you weren't at Evergreen State College. And yet, because he simply said, we shouldn't act to go away on the day of absence. This is where in the past black students have left. Now this year they wanted the black students to stay and the white students and faculty to leave. We need to come together. Well, that was enough for them to threaten him. And he said, I never anticipated I'd have to teach my biology class in the state park near the campus. But it has gotten so crazy that even the liberal activists are eating their own. What do you think, Allie Beth?
Exactly. He is very progressive. The only thing that he did was suggest. So I wonder if everyone knows the backstory. Y'all probably know the backstory on everything that happened. And so at Evergreen College, they have a day every year called a Day of Absence where black people, and I think minorities too, all minorities are allowed to leave campus and just not come to class. Well, now this year it's a little bit different because of Donald Trump in the election. They felt these minority students felt unsafe. So instead of taking a day of absence, which is ridiculous in and of itself, they said, okay, all white people need to leave campus. Only, black and brown people can be on campus. Well, one very progressive professor wrote a letter saying, I don't think that this is a good idea. This doesn't actually accomplish what they want to accomplish. I don't know if he mentioned segregation, but that's what's coming to my mind. This goes back to the days of segregation. Why are we going backwards? And he was on Tucker Carlson a couple weeks ago because these students mobbed his classroom and called him a racist, a white supremacist, simply for suggesting that, hey, this isn't the direction that we want to go. He didn't say, oh, these minority students are snowflakes, or, oh, they shouldn't feel scared of Donald Trump. I don't think he said any of those things. He probably hates Donald Trump, but it's so scary to see that this kind of reaction can be solicited just from implicitly saying, hey, these students probably need to go a different direction and toughen up a little bit. That in and of itself is threatening. And I just want to know where this cowardly president of the college is. And I've heard exchanges, and basically he's giving into their demands. Now we've got this group of community police at Evergreen who has deemed themselves community police that are wielding bats, literally wielding bats and walking around. That is madness. Is this 1940s Germany? This is scary, and this is happening. This sounds like something from another country, but it's happening here. And the administration there is doing nothing. They're letting themselves be overrun by minority snowflake 18-year-olds. That's insane.
I think what's so interesting is I want to give them the right to be able to protest. So I disagree with their form of protest, but I think it's perfectly okay for them to want to leave campus. What I disagree with is forcing students that have paid tuition and service and fees and time in that classroom, they paid for that place, to force them off a campus. That's something I completely disagree with, because then it's going back to, it's silencing their voice, and then it's just, that's such an obvious next step would be then to not even let them have admittance into the even campus university.
But I would argue that it wasn't a protest. To me, a protest, so if you go back to what it originally was, a day of absence for minority students to leave campus that they've had going up to this date, that is not a protest to me, because they are absolved of all consequences. To me, a protest, you go in and you say, or you go in or you leave or whatever, you say, I'm going to deal with the consequences. I'm going to take a bad grade on this. If it's a test that day, I'm going to do that. I'm going to protest, because this is not a protest. This is them complaining, which maybe they were rightfully complaining, but the administration saying you are absolved of any punishment, academic punishment, or anything that you might otherwise have to endure if you left class. That to me is wrong. And that to me is patronizing, and it's condescending. And that is more racist, saying, oh, well, you need to be coddled and you don't deserve the consequences that white people can handle, but you can't handle it. That's not a protest to me.
Yeah, so I guess I would agree with that to the extent that, like I would assume that if you protest, you're willing to bear the punishment, you're paying a price for what you're doing.
Yeah. And civil disobedience or whatever it might be.
Exactly.
That's exactly what we say.
I understand. So I guess that would be more of a systemic day of weeping and gnashing of teeth, which would be, again, kind of ludicrous.
Which is turned on them.
Well, again, Bernie Goldberg puts it this way. How did the school's president respond? Back to Allie Beth's comment. Did he suspend or expel members of the mob? Did he at least issue a mealy-mouthed note of disapproval? Of course not. And so it brings us to the conversation we had yesterday with Dr. Everett Piper, because, he had a situation at his school, which, of course, is a Christian school, Oklahoma Wesleyan University. But after a sermon was given on 1 Corinthians 13, this young student came up and he was offended because it made him feel bad for not feeling love. And he said, I'm not making this stuff up. And he says, our culture has taught our kids to be self-absorbed and narcissistic. At any time their feelings are hurt, they're victims. Anyone who dares challenge them and thus makes them feel bad about themselves is a hater, a bigot, an oppressor, or a victimizer, which is why he wrote this piece called This Is Not a Daycare, It's a University. And he's got his book coming out in August, which has the title from Regnery called It's Not a Daycare. So we'll probably have him on. Maybe he could be on with the two of you, and we'll just let you two have a chance to interact with him on that particular issue.
But it's interesting. So I'm looking up a little bit of stuff on Evergreen. They don't even receive grades there. They receive narrative evaluations.
They started it when I was in school. They were first starting this. So that's how long it's been.
Yeah. So
as alternative school. That's right.
Yeah. Alternative school is a bad word. You don't want to go to alternative school. It's because you've been suspended from regular school in Tennessee. But again, Tennessee, I'm not locking up Tennessee as the epitome of the worthy of emulation relative to education. But nevertheless, I'm looking at some of this stuff right now. And again, I just think it's just another step further in their process right now. But the fact that you don't even give your students grades is just I think I'm sure there's a logical argument that follows.
UC Santa
this.
Cruz and Evergreen State are the only two that I know that don't give grades, and it really is hard to get into graduate school knowing some individuals that have gone to these schools, especially UC Santa Cruz. Well, anyway, we'll go on to there. One other issue that I thought was kind of interesting, our liberal professor there was saying, what they have there on the campus is what's called an equity council. You got to love this, right?
Oh my gosh.
And of course, they have the diversity councils and things like that, but he's even talking about how they're sort of taking this whole idea of critical race theory. And Allie, Beth, when we come back from the break, I'd love to maybe have you educate us on that as well, because some of your videos have been about this idea of white privilege and a number of other things. But this whole idea of critical race theory just, again, illustrates some of the challenges we have. And that, of course, also leads to some phone calls. So some of you want to talk about the racial issues that have surfaced even at Evergreen. So if you'd like to do so, 1-800-351-1212. We'll come back, get some education from Nick and Allie Beth, and then we'll take some phone calls. All that coming up right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. News out of Minneapolis reports of an aspiring teen boxer granted a religious accommodation. Amaya Zafar is a 16-year-old boxing protege that for some time has had her sights set on representing the United States as a boxer at the 2020 Olympics. But current rules place her in the position of having to choose between her faith and her sport. USA Boxing, however, has solved the problem for the St. Paul teenager by accommodating her faith in the ring. As a result, Savar will be permitted to keep her arms and legs covered with long sleeves and leggings as her faith requires. That's a simple solution, and while I don't share Zafar's religious beliefs concerning clothing, I do support efforts by anyone, USA Boxing included, to take reasonable steps to respect the religious beliefs of Americans whenever possible. Of course, Zafar is not the first boxer to need a religious accommodation. Cassius Clay, better known as Muhammad Ali, famously asserted his religious beliefs as grounds for conscientious objection to the Vietnam War. In other sports-related cases, we are working to protect the right of Coach Joe Kennedy to pray silently at the 50-yard line when the game is over. Meanwhile, in Florida, we are defending the right of a football team at a Christian school in Florida to be able to pray over the loudspeaker prior to kickoff. As these stories remind us, religious liberty impacts every area of our life, including sports. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join a conversation, 1-800-351-1212. It is our Wednesday Millennial Round Table. We're privileged to have in studio with us today Allie Beth Stuckey and Nick Pitts. And Allie Beth, help us out for a minute, because you certainly on some of the videos, and I would encourage people to go to the conservative millennial blog and find out more about those, address this issue of white privilege. And for a lot of our listeners, they've heard the term, but where does this come from in terms of race theory and everything?
White privilege basically means that inherently, no matter who you are, your or your economic class, that you have inherent privilege that makes your life easier than other races because you are white. So even if you have an African American person and you have a white person that was basically raised the same way, maybe both had a mom and a dad and was raised in poverty, and the white guy ended up working his way through college, but maybe the African American guy didn't, they would say, well, that's because of white privilege, nothing else. And so it becomes this argument for basically anything, that if a white person disagrees with an African American person or a Mexican American person, that it's because of their white privilege that we are unable to understand the plight of what they're going through, which, just like racism, sexism, and all kinds of discrimination, that absolutely exists. I'm not denying that that doesn't exist anywhere. However, I think it's hyperbole and a red herring to use white privilege against any argument that a white person makes. It's simply because you don't want to refute the facts of an argument. And I also just don't think that it's true necessarily that two people, just because they're in different races and they're in the same economic class, and one made one choice and another made another choice, that the reason they didn't get to the same destination was because of their race. Choices matter, and they don't want to deal with that, these people who think that we're perpetrators of white privilege.
You know, and at Evergreen, they even talk about this idea of race theory now making its way into the sciences. You know, I saw something the other day where you had this secular feminist mathematician that said we need to redo math. You know, and most people think that 2 + 2 = 4, but he's even now in the science area, because he's a biology professor, saying now it's showing up there. It's been in the social sciences for decades, but it's now showing up in engineering, science, in places, mathematics, where, again, this idea is, well, your particular perspective about reality and truth is actually, again, conditioned by your white privilege, by your Western culture, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so I think that if we just look at the telos, if we look at it from a 30,000-foot level, what we're seeing is they're wanting to eradicate any distinctions that makes us any different than one another. So whether it's our race, whether it's our gender, whether it's our sexuality, whatever that is, they're wanting to eradicate some of those distinctions. But again, at the end of the day, when we eradicate distinctions, we eradicate part of those qualities and characteristics that not only make us who we are, but also bring about this beauty of the American experiment. And from a Christian perspective, the goal isn't to be colorblind. The goal is to be cognizant and very aware of who we are and who God has made us to be, to celebrate those differences and then to overcome those differences in order that we might come together in a beautiful diversity. As we read about in Paul in Ephesians 3:8-9, the manifold wisdom of God would be on display through the church, to the rulers, and to the authorities. Yes, there's no Greek, nor Jew, nor male, nor female in Christ Jesus, but we also understand that we have distinct roles in that in order that we might beautifully express the magnanimity of our God.
Let's take some phone calls, because a lot of you want to talk about this issue of race and race theory. So let's go to Missouri first. And Scott, thank you for joining our conversation today.
Hi, Kerby. Thanks for taking my call once again. I call you quite a bit. With respect to the white privilege, I wish I'd have had a little bit of that back when I was in college in 1988 to 1983, when nearly every African American could get a scholarship, and an Anglo-Saxon white male pretty much had to work his way through college. But that's a different point. One of the points I want to make about this, though, is if you've I don't know if you've noticed, but the University of Missouri had a racial issue.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We all know about what happened in Columbia, Missouri. Go ahead. Yes.
Well, interestingly, the freshman class that's going into the University of Missouri is down 14%.
That's right. I did a commentary, and that'll last for 4 years. So, I mean, there was a financial hit that it took. Well, go ahead.
And not only that, the financial hit, but now Missouri State University, which is one of their sister schools, it's part of the university complex, which Missouri State happens to be located in Springfield, Missouri. It has record enrollment, simply and partly because of that racial strife that occurred up there at Columbia. So this is all going to have financial consequences.
Yes, it is.
Colleges, and this college, I forget the name that you were talking about.
Evergreen State, yeah. I mean, again, some of the kind of graduates, their alumni might like this, but I don't know. I'm just beginning to wonder. Because as Tucker Carlson said the other day when he had done this interview with this professor, he said, just imagine now if you get a call from your alumni association wanting you to give, unless they're calling from Hillsdale College or something like that. I think the answer for most of this is going to be what? No.
Yeah, so you can go on Evergreen's website and you can fill out an evaluation form and on their president. So be sure to go on the website and fill out an evaluation.
Tell them what to think.
As to what you think. But again, I think that's one of the beauties of the American system, that the market is reacting.
Yeah.
So Missouri is a primary example.
Yeah.
The market is rectifying what they believe to be wrong.
I know.
And students are not going. And based on conversations that I've had with recruiters at the University of Missouri, things. It doesn't look like it's getting any better right now. They've doubled down on some of their recruitment stuff.
Out of some of those buildings, just turn off the lights.
Yeah, and so the market and this isn't the only place where the market's done that. Look at Target, for example. Target took their big stand on transgender bathrooms, and the market responded to that. And ESPN, the market's responded to that. Basketball, the market responds to that. So yeah, they can continue to make these big cultural stands, but what they're going to find is they're increasingly standing alone, and nobody likes to be alone except for Celine Dion. Oh, was it good until I sung out?
Yeah,
I wish you could see her face.
Never know what's happening here.
Yes,
no, we never do. I'm glad you mentioned ESPN because that's my commentary today. They did that study of ESPN and realized that in some of the channels for ESPN, Republicans left by 36%.
Absolutely, because people are going to watch sports. They're going to get away from the news.
Some people want to get a beer and watch a sports. I don't want to hear about Caitlyn Jenner or whatever.
Yeah, and again, it's just it points back to this politicalization of our culture, that everything has got to be political. So even to the extent that Walmart, for example, so I don't know if you guys saw in the news that Walmart employees are saying that Walmart is the Donald Trump of corporations. No, Walmart's just a corporation. You don't have to liken everything to Donald Trump to make a point. If anything,
and is that a smart business move anyway? Why would you do that? Why would you polarize?
So exactly. You're setting yourself up for obvious failure. So.
Yeah.
Just interesting.
And we've said that many times before. If I could say anything to Home Depot and Target and Apple and all the others, just stay out of the culture wars, because what you end up doing is alienating individuals that want to use your product or buy your service. And when you get all political, then people start drawing lines and you end up losing money.
Exactly. And there's no need for it either. There's communications experts out there that are more than willing to help you to be able to navigate through these waters. And so it's just important for us just to not place improper expectations upon institutions and individuals that don't need to be in that space.
Well, we need to take a break. And yesterday we even talked about whether climate is socially constructed. We were having fun with that because, after all, if I can be any kind of gender or any kind of age, why couldn't we just say, well, I just want the temperature to be, a certain degrees and everything will be fine. But again, this idea of social construct and racial critical theory on the campus, just all sorts of issues that we'll talk about. When we come back, though, we have some other things. Why the elites hate us, that is, those of us around the table. And more importantly, what happens when we don't raise kids to become adults? That's from Senator Ben Sash. We got some material from his new book. And, of course, we're going to have him on the program. And when we do, maybe I should bring the two of you back to talk about that with him as well. He is very, very articulate. Not bad for a guy with a Harvard degree. So let's take a break. When we come back, we'll give you a chance to join our conversation. 1-800-351-1212. Those of you on the line, if you just hold on, we'll put you first up right when we come back.
If you've listened for any length of time, you've probably heard about Point of View listeners who've done amazing things, started ministries, found their life's calling, impacted their city, their state, the nation. But let me be clear, you don't have to have a huge impact to be faithful. I thought about that when I read a note from Joanne in Texas. She admitted, up until recently, I've not had much of a political view, nor have I ever been so informed. But since I signed up for your email and website information, I can now get the correct information that the public is oblivious to. Joanne ended by thanking us for the Take Action section of our website, where we make it easy for you to express your views on key issues with your elected representatives. Everything we do on the air, online, through mail and email is made possible through people like you who invest in Point of View so we can invest in issues that matter. Take your place on the Truth Team. Call 1-800-347-5151 or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today on a Wednesday. It is our Millennial Round Table, and we are privileged to have in studio with us today Allie, Beth, Stuckey, and Nick Pitts. And before the program is over, we'll talk about both of their websites and how you can connect up with them. We also have links to their Twitter page, Facebook page, and I would certainly encourage you to learn from both of them. We certainly do as we go around the round table. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let me head to California next, and listening on KYCC. Bobby, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Okay, and I understand.
Yeah, Bobby, go ahead.
Yes, hi, how are you this afternoon?
Very good. I think you wanted to add to our conversation. What would you like to add?
Yeah, yes, what I want to add to it, if you don't mind, is this. First of all, let me say that I think you guys do an absolutely awesome job there on the radio station. My family and I, we listen to KYCC every day, all day at home, in our office, in our cars and everything. But this is what I wanted to say as relates to the topic and discussion. I'll be very brief. One, I'm a Republican and I'm conservative, but even more than that, I am an African-American man. And what the problem is, this is the primary problem. The millennials that are in college now and, you know, facing the world, they're not really educated to the level where they truly understand the deep and dark struggles of racism that happened, let's say, back in the baby boomer time and above. They have a measure of understanding, but not a deep understanding. But this is the flip side of it. What they are doing, although I don't agree with it, what they are doing exactly what was done to their forefathers generations ago.
Wow.
Does it make it right? Absolutely not. It doesn't. It doesn't make it right, because those students of color at that school have every right to be on that campus, to learn and to get all the benefits that they possibly can from that campus. But to just simply say that is wrong, although it is, we have to understand that there's a root that started many generations ago, and understand when a root is not cut out, what does it do? It continues to grow. Now, you can cut some of the branches off, but if you don't cut the root out, which is racism, then it's going to continue to grow, and that's what we continue to see. And that's the problem there.
Well, and again, you know, this is a generation, you know, I grew up, of course, I'm the oldest one around the table, where my Sunday school leader went and marched in Selma, Alabama. I had a neighbor that went. My father worked a little bit in dealing with equal housing. But this is a generation that's ancient history. But what they get is this sort of virulent, anti-white, white privilege kind of rhetoric in the classroom. So it doesn't come out of the hurt of the 1960s of the civil rights movement, but it comes out of the rhetoric of these professors who really tried, I think, in many cases, to even divide us more than we're divided right now. What are your thoughts?
Well, really, what it comes out of the media. Honestly, it comes out of the media, because the thing is this. I myself, being the age I'm at, I've had a healthy dose of racism in my short life. But because I am educated in the history of not only Africans who came over here and became African Americans, I have a different appreciation, one, of the struggle, and then how to govern myself here in America. I have a different appreciation of that. And it's not to say that on certain levels I still don't deal with it. I absolutely do. But because I'm educated, I can combat it in a way that, one, is nonviolent. Secondly, that is educated. And third, I always come out on top. Bless God. So without that type of knowledge, you will always fall into those traps because you're not coming from a place of true knowledge. You're not coming from a place of personal experience. And then you're not coming from a place where, see, this is the thing. When Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, nonviolent protests also died with him.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah.
Now, you had Malcolm X, who stood for by any means necessary. Now, he was assassinated and killed, but the spirit of that never died.
Well, Bobby, I appreciate you educating us. I want to go around the round table and get some comments because you got some shaking heads here. So, Nick, start us off.
Bobby, I completely agree with you. And again, I don't think the the lack of education is just a race issue. I think that's just a broad issue across for all college students. Just an inability to be able to better understand just the forces and kind of the narratives that are being fed to them. And then, as the Wall Street Journal kind of indicates, the inability for the majority, or at least 1/3 of college students on half of college campuses, to be able to ascertain the quality of the evidence that's been presented to them through, may it be a professor or may it be a media, and the inability to be able to put forward a comprehensive argument. So we just have them kind of regurgitating some of these things. And when you don't properly understand these issues, especially race issues that are as sensitive as what they can be, but also as ingrained and kind of heated as they can be, it just can be very detrimental, not necessarily to bring about solutions, but to continually further exasperate the problem. Yeah. And I think again, I'll point to another article, kind of Politico came out with a poll probably a little over a year ago, and it wasn't necessary. And what was so shocking about this poll relative to racism on college campuses, it wasn't so much that college students didn't think that race was an issue. It was that they were apathetic to race as being an issue. And so it's not that they're on the forefront, but rather they're just kind of apathetically dealing with it. Now, there are extreme elements with that, but I do think that there are some group, the vast majority of college students just think it's out of sight, out of mind, because what we've continued to see with college students is they're very myopically consumed in the moment. They don't understand history. They don't understand their communities. They don't understand just the larger narrative that's at play.
Well, I totally agree with you. It's just like saying that a metropolitan city is all bad because it has a high crime rate. Well, let's just use Anywhere USA. Well, all of Anywhere USA is not bad. There's only a certain section that makes up that crime rate. So the thing is this: without the proper education and then let me say this too. And I heard one of the callers said that they wish back in the late 80s that he was able to use I'll say the quote unquote white privilege. Well, what he has to understand is white privilege has always been here.
Yep.
Unfortunately, it's always been here. So to say that he wished that he was able to use it, well, that's always been available. Now, affirmative action has done good and bad. We both know that. I'm not going to go that far into affirmative action, but this is the thing. We as African Americans would not have had to fight for so many things just to be a normal, law-abiding American citizen if it was already made ready and available to us according to the Constitution. So this fight has been a long time in the making, and it's still going on. It's probably not going to ever end. However, like I said earlier, I'm not saying anything to condone anything that is going on, but we do have to understand where the root started. And if we're going to have a discussion, we always have to talk about the root.
Very good. Need to take a break. We've got one of those mandatory breaks. We will continue our conversation with our Millennial Round Table right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, last month I talked about the economic woes of ESPN when the network laid off 100 people. There are economic reasons, but the more important ones are political reasons. ESPN executives and on-air talent came to the wrong conclusion about bringing political discussions into the network. It didn't improve ESPN's ratings, it made them worse. Clay Travis explained that middle America wants to pop a beer and listen to sports talk. They don't want to be lectured about why Caitlyn Jenner is a hero, Michael Sam is the new Jackie Robinson of sports, and Colin Kaepernick is the Rosa Parks of football. A recent survey validates his conclusions. The survey aggregated 43 different media markets to see the political leanings of ESPN consumers in those markets. The study found that Republicans were fleeing ESPN in droves. In the last year, the ESPN audience became 5% less Republican. ESPN2 actually became 10% less Republican. And the biggest partisan shift happened on ESPN News, whose audience became 36% less Republican. When the study came out, Clay Travis said that the results did not surprise him. Instead, he said it put to rest the liberal sports media arguments that ESPN's politics are having no impact on viewership. ESPN's ratings are down substantially in the last year, and a big reason why is the network's liberal political slant on sports stories. This study provides the needed documentation for what many already assume to be true. ESPN has been chasing off lots of viewers who merely wanted to watch their favorite sports team and get some interesting sports commentary. It wasn't a smart move to turn ESPN into MSNBC with sports added. They wanted to watch sports, not be lectured about left-wing ideology. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kerby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We talked a little bit about the racial divide, but I want to put another article on the table here. This one comes from William McGurn, Why Elites Hate, because there's another division here, and it's a very significant one. It's between the elites and the rest of America. He starts out by saying, 9 years after Barack Obama accused small-towners of clinging to guns and religion. Remember that? Nearly 3 years after Jonathan Gruber was shown to have attributed Obamacare's passage to the stupidity of the American voter, and 8 months after Hillary Clinton pronounced half of Donald Trump's voters irredeemable, of course deplorable too, Democrats are now getting some sophisticated advice. You don't win votes by showing contempt for the voters. Okay, that's a slap the forehead. I never would have thought of that. But we do have a real division right now. Let me come to you first, Nick, between the elites who say, you know what, we really know what's best for you, and the average American saying, no, you don't really know what's best for me. I know what's best for me.
Yeah, again, there's this sense that we're just becoming ever more divided because you can point to a variety of different manifestations of this, whether it's through gerrymandering that's happening kind of at the congressional level, where we're creating these districts that are just kind of moving us more towards the right or towards the left. You can point to the neighborliness that we're losing right now, where individuals aren't knowing even their neighbor's name. 51% of Americans don't know what their neighbor's name is. We can point to the fact that we're not civically engaged anymore, that we're just individuals that we're not going to join the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis, we're not going to church, we're not joining whatever community organization. We're just increasingly becoming more divided. And as I'm sure Allie Beth knows really well, it's really easy to say some nasty stuff to people online when you don't know the other person online. Because I know Allie Beth has just received some just atrocious remarks that I would hope nobody would ever say to your face. And I wish they wouldn't say it, period. But it's just increasingly we're seeing these troll effects that kind of just spring up from this, which I think is just, again, not setting us up well as we make our way into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting and ironic because people are getting lonelier and lonelier and feeling more disconnected because of exactly what you said. We're not connected to our neighbors. Things like iPhones, iPads, everything increasingly isolates us. And yet we are more social than ever and more connected in some ways than ever through the very things that isolate us. So through social media, through the internet, we know more about everyone else, but we're increasingly alone and isolated, which is maybe why you get that trolling effect, because people who maybe haven't been socialized very well, that's the only interaction that they have with someone. So they're just going to say whatever they want to say.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm just engaging with, so for example, if I'm a conservative and all I'm doing is reading conservative news outlets, I'm not going to see the passion and the fervor for the counter argument that I would if I went to the New York Times or if I went to Washington Post, et cetera, et cetera. And if I'm a liberal and I'm only reading liberal news sources and I'm only seeing the demonization of the right, when I read a Wall Street Journal or when I read a Daily Caller, when I go to the Blaze or something like that, and I don't engage with some of those sources, it's very easy for me to demonize them, not just disagree with them. And then I just create these vapid, shallow arguments that really don't hold water when I get outside of my circles. And so then there's just this distrust because we've got this confirmation bias that kind of makes our way into it, which again, moving forward is just going to be increasingly all the more tough.
I think so. What about this idea of elite bias? You know, again, if you've gone to Ivy League schools, and I've been privileged to go there and even teach in some of them occasionally, you have this idea that we know better than you. And the story I love to tell every once in a while is one of the senators from Texas, Phil Gramm, when he was actually holding hearings about Hillary Care. This is what came before Obamacare. There was at one point a statement that he was making to one of the people in the bureaucracy that says, you know, I really think that I know more about what my family needs in terms of health care than anyone else. And the bureaucrat said, oh, no, Senator Gramm, we care as much about you and your family as you do. And he said, really? What are my kids' names? and the point he was making is, you know, you have this kind of sense of what would be best for me in terms of health care. You don't know the names of my kids. You don't know their health issues. You don't even know anything. And yet you have this sort of arrogant idea that, well, we will actually construct the best health care plan for you right now. We're in the midst of having another debate in the United States Senate about health care. And again, here we go again.
It goes
right?
back to this like 1980s mentality where we believe in a larger centralized state that creates efficiencies. Now, while it does create efficiencies, it also exasperates some like what's happening in Vermont isn't necessarily what's happening here in Texas. The problems that are plaguing California are not the same problems that are plaguing Tennessee. Now, there are some instances where there needs to be a strong central government relative to foreign policy or relative to I don't know. We'll go with
immigration would be a good one.
Immigration is a great
borders,
example.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah,
national security.
But the less is more when it comes to that, because the problems in Tennessee relative to education are very different than the problems that are happening in the Northeast right now, because the Northeast is just this intellectual hotbed it's just very normal. And so it needs to have the mobility, but also the structure and framework whereby these states can operate and can meet the needs of their individual entities and constituents.
And even within a state, some of our listeners are in North Carolina. If you're in the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle, Duke and University of North Carolina, that's really different than maybe out in rural North Carolina. So again, that's why I think education really has to be at the local level, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Again, I know Tennessee and Texas very well, simply because, one, I've lived in Texas for almost 10 years now. Mind blown for a second. I've lived in Texas for almost 10 years now. That's crazy.
That's hard.
And so I know I'm getting old.
And I might point out both of your parents are representatives. Your father's representative in Tennessee. Your father's representative in Texas. So you both have also seen this on the other side too.
And again, the educational needs in Texas are not the same as Tennessee. So primary example is there is far greater need for English as a second language classes in Texas than there is in Tennessee.
For sure.
And Texas needs to have the resources and the capabilities to be able to respond to that, because that's a pressing need on them that doesn't just affect individuals that English is the second language, but it also affects those that have English as the first language because they're in that classroom as well. You can't apply that same pattern and system in Tennessee because there are not nearly as many individuals as English as the second language. We struggle with English as a first language, y'all. And so it's just important for us. It's just different. And so it just needs to be not nearly as many universal solutions that are placed on the whole.
Yeah. And again, when you have the elites in Washington, D.C. telling the entire nation what should happen, that doesn't work very well.
And that's true politically, but think about how that's also true culturally. If you look at the other coast, everyone in California, both our entertainment and technology is rooted there. And our entertainment and technology, and especially those wedded together, is telling everyone how to think. So you've got these elites in Hollywood who are saying, oh, open borders, let's hug a terrorist, let's let all the refugees in. Well, that's really easy to say in your gated community with your armed security. It's also easy to be anti-Second Amendment when you've got armed security all day. When you're flying your private jets, you don't have to worry about terrorism. So I think that's another entity that we're also mistrusting. We mistrust the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. We mistrust the Meryl Streeps of the world because they are so far removed. Whether they used to be the common man or not is a different question, but now they are so far removed from the needs and the dangers and the vulnerabilities that the common person has that I think a lot of people are getting frustrated at them preaching to us from their pulpit of, the stage of the Academy Award or something like that, because how could they possibly know what is best for my family and my safety and what I think is right for me? It's really easy from them, for their platform and perspective, to throw rocks at us for being quote unquote bigoted.
Like Katy Perry. I love what that one SEAL said. Well, why don't you do your next concert in Syria?
Yeah,
and see how that goes. You want to hug a terrorist? Okay, you first. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. And I think that it's important for us to remember that more often than not, when we're not thinking rationally, we tend to project our own our immediate surroundings upon individuals. So, for example, right now in the studio, I can just think everybody's a Christian. Why? Because everybody in this room is a Christian. But that's not an accurate projection to put onto the whole. And so when you're in New York or when you're in Los Angeles, just on the coast, well, they typically tend to be more liberal. So it's going to be obvious that there's going to be more of a liberal bias on the television. There's typically going to be more homosexuals because there's more homosexuals that are on the coast. And so it's just important for us to understand that when watching this, just because that's just their reality projecting it onto the whole, which is obvious. It's just not the case.
Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about another issue, and this comes from Senator Ben Sasse. It's been a while since we've had him on the program, but his new book raises some very good questions. But one of those is, what happens when we don't raise kids to become adults? Allie Beth has a lot to say about that, and I know Nick does as well. And he just reminds us of what he went through when, at the age of, I believe it was 39, they said, let's have you run a university. Not because he had that kind of experience, but he'd already had experience in turning things around. But he discovered that the students coming from Nebraska weren't exactly like the students that used to come from Nebraska to the college. We'll take a break and talk about that right after this.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, if you'd like to join our conversation, it is the Wednesday Millennial Round Table. And before we're done here, let me just mention we're going to have some links that we're going to point you to for both Allie, Beth, as well as Nick Pitts. But we have on our particular Point of View website here listed a couple of articles we've been working our way through. But this one is very helpful because sometimes as a person publishes a book, they'll take excerpts and put columns. So if you'd like to read Ben Sass's book before you get at Ben Sass's book. This is it. It appeared in the Daily Signal, What Happens When We Don't Raise Kids to Become Adults. Now, as I told you around the roundtable, I should tell everybody else, I've sort of known of him for a long time because one of my staff members' son was actually his roommate at Harvard.
Wow.
And the staff member's son is now a professor of economics at Harvard, and we've been following this career of Ben Sass when he went from Harvard to Oxford, and then eventually, I misspoke a minute ago, he was 37 years of age when he took over that university in Nebraska. Now, if you've ever been to Nebraska, unless you live in Lincoln, you're really coming from a farm. So, you're really coming with people that usually have a good work ethic and everything. He points out that when he came to this university, Midland, they were on the verge of missing payroll 4 months in a row. Well, he was a turnaround individual, and in some respects, he had a same kind of success story that Dr. Cook had at Dallas Baptist University. But that was not the issue. Payroll was not the issue. Issue was the attitudes of these individuals. And here he talks about one student staged a sit-in in my office one day, announcing that he would not leave until I resolved a scheduling problem for him. He was upset that the registrar wouldn't be offering a particular course he needed the following semester. Again, those of us who are a little bit older couldn't even believe this, but this is what he had to deal with when he finds himself at Midland University.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. So the book's called The Vanishing American Adult, and I've read through about 3/4 of it. I'm going to hopefully finish the rest of it tonight. I highly recommend it. It's just this sense that there's a need to reestablish a work ethic, to be able to differentiate between wants and desires. And so I just really appreciate. So if you read the article that's listed on the website, it kind of takes you through this story of just this sense of creating a work ethic within inside of us. And I think about my own life, and I think about the times that I when I was in high school, I mowed yards as a kid. And so every summer, I mean, I worked for the Clarksville, Montgomery County school system in Clarksville, Tennessee, and I would mow yards. And by mow yards, I don't mean I get to sit on a lawnmower.
No.
I mean, there was another. No, I wish I even got to push it. I was the weed eating boy.
Yeah.
So pretty much.
What do you have?
So pretty much, I was the guy, the senior.
And that hurts your back faster than anything.
Oh
right?
My goodness! So the senior eldsman on our little team of two, he would ride around and he would point to a hill, and because the grass was so slick, he would just say, "That hill, weed eat." And in Tennessee in the summer, you're just weed eating on these hills, but inevitably there's snakes that are underneath the rocks, and so all these spiders and all this other stuff that I got the joy of being able to experience. But it developed within me a work ethic, because it forced me to wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, to go to work at 7:30, to get off at 3:30. 5 days a week, and it helped me to understand, one, the roles that are necessary to make sure our economy continues to move forward and our communities flourish. But it also gave me a greater appreciation for the work that's done that I just can kind of take for granted. And so now I'm not weed eating anymore, but I have a great appreciation for those that do weed eat now.
Yeah.
And I think that's just it built character within me that just I think that has proved invaluable to me, and that is still shaping me in ways that I still don't fully understand today.
You ever seen the TV show Dirty Jobs?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
One of the reasons I think I like it, and probably you like it as well, is because I've done some of those jobs.
Yeah.
And I've done I'm glad I haven't done some of the other jobs, especially the ones involving height, but it's just, you just get yourself so dirty, so hot and everything, and you begin to realize what real work is. And that's something that we seem to be missing in a culture where everybody wears helmets and everybody's got to be careful, and no kind of mistakes can ever be made, and I'm going to do all I can to protect my kids from the slings and arrows of living in the culture. Sooner or later they have to meet reality, don't they, Allie Beth?
Absolutely. And I was by no means a safe space seeking college student. However, I will say that my college experience was relatively easy compared to people who had to maybe work 3 jobs and pay their way through college. I didn't necessarily have that experience, and like a lot of people my age, or people who went through college the same time that I did, you did graduate thinking, okay, I am fully prepared. I could take that 6-figure job right now and probably tell those baby boomers what to do. You kind of have that mentality, the same mentality that when you graduated from high school thinking you know everything. When I graduated from college, I also had that mentality, thinking that, okay, I'm prepared for anything. I know everything. It wasn't until my first job that I was truly humbled to know, wow, I don't know anything about PR, and this was my major. What the heck? And long weeks and long hours of tears and mistakes and criticism. And so I say this to the encouragement for people who are in college right now and maybe have fallen into the trap of feeling entitled or feeling like, oh, maybe I haven't developed this work ethic. It's not too late, and you will inevitably be humbled by that first job. And I look back and I'm just so thankful for everything that I learned in that first job, even though I didn't like it at all for very long. But every job that I've taken since then, every opportunity that I've had now, I'm in a totally different role in media. However, I constantly think back to what I learned through those mistakes, and my boss is telling me that I'm not doing a good job and having to do better and working for clients until 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And I'm just so grateful because I look around me and it's actually really rare to have that work ethic.
I completely agree. Like, I'm not weed eating anymore. Like, but I am having to wake up early. I am waking up early and seeing the value of waking up early.
Yep.
I'm not going to the VFW hall to be able to eat lunch with Mr. Pat and then Miss Luann. But I am having to use those skills to be able to develop those relationships that I think are necessary as I continue to move forward. And I highlighted an article in the Daily Briefing today out of Bloomberg News that highlighted the points of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They said 20 years ago, from 16 to 19-year-olds, 70% of them were either looking for a job or had a job in the month of July. 10 years ago, that number had fallen to 53%. Today, that number is at 43%. So over 20 years, we've dropped 27 percentage points from regards to 16 to 19-year-olds that are looking for a summer job. And the primary reason is that they're saying that it's not enough money to be able to support their schools because it's so healthy. But at the end of the day, the job is more than just trying to supply you money for schools. It's developing character, helping you to see that you're a part of something bigger in the community.
Yes, again, you say there, mowing lawns in the summer taught me lessons I never learned in a book and shaped me in ways I still don't fully appreciate. And then you quote from Ben Sass, which we're quoting from today.
Exactly. And even I think about mowing lawns to even, I had a job working at a contracting firm, and literally the blueprint machine was just we would just print off blueprints. And I just held blueprints for about 4 hours a day and fed them into this machine that would print off these but it was so character forming within me that I'm grateful for that, because today all I do is press print when I actually do print something with paper. And again, I'm mindful of the individuals that have developed those technologies and those skills necessary for me to be able to have that ease with it.
You know, one of the other things that Senator Ben Sass said is that the survey that they took there at the university said sometimes repeatedly woke me up in the middle of the night was the aching sense that just the students lacked a work ethic, but more fundamentally, they lacked even an experiential understanding of the difference between production and consumption. And then he says students overwhelmingly highlighted their desire for freedom from responsibilities. The activities they most enjoyed, are you ready for these? They reported were sleeping in, skipping classes, and partying. A few mentioned canceled classes as the best part of their 4 years on a university.
Were they going to school or were they going to a vacation? Like, or was it like a theme park? Like, I think one of the things that's interesting in his book is he continues to differentiate between wants and needs, and how quickly the needs that we have become the needs that there have been more needs now and less wants that we have in the world today. And I think the example he uses is that since the air conditioning used to be a luxury, but now it's just something that we just kind of nested, like that's just kind of that's a need that we have today, whereas it used to be just a desirable thing. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I was in Italy this past week. And it was shocking though, because as I was walking through the streets of Rome, there would be some hotels that would specify on their signs air conditioned. Yeah. And how in America today, like I understood. There, I mean, even growing up, I remember when certain signs in hotels would say HBO or cable package or something like that.
Or now it's internet. You know, like if you don't have air conditioning and cable and internet, forget this.
Yeah, you're not getting my business.
Out.
And so it's so interesting today that what were once luxuries have now become necessities in our world today, which I think in large part, there's prevalence because of the technological innovation, but also to just the increasing entitlement that individuals have.
I still remember that you can still roll up a window, but now they're all electric, aren't they?
Hey, I remember that too, actually.
Yes.
No comment. No comment.
Doesn't know.
I had to put at least one age difference here. But when we come back, let's talk a little bit about some of the resources here, because Nick's mentioned quite a number of things from the daily briefing, and of course you need to be able to find Allie, Beth, Stuckey and some of the videos, so we'll talk about some of those issues, but we'll see if we can get another phone call in right after these important messages.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. News out of Minneapolis reports of an aspiring teen boxer granted a religious accommodation. Amaya Zafar is a 16-year-old boxing protege that for some time has had her sights set on representing the United States as a boxer at the 2020 Olympics. But current rules place her in the position of having to choose between her faith and her sport. USA Boxing, however, has solved the problem for the St. Paul teenager by accommodating her faith in the ring. As a result, Zafar will be permitted to keep her arms and legs covered with long sleeves and leggings as her faith requires. That's a simple solution, and while I don't share Zafar's religious beliefs concerning clothing, I do support efforts by anyone, USA Boxing included, to take reasonable steps to respect the religious beliefs of Americans whenever possible. Of course, Zafar is not the first boxer to need a religious accommodation. Cassius Clay, better known as Muhammad Ali, famously asserted his religious beliefs as grounds for conscientious objection to the Vietnam War. In other sports-related cases, we are working to protect the right of Coach Joe Kennedy to pray silently at the 50-yard line when the game is over. Meanwhile, in Florida, we are defending the right of a football team at a Christian school in Florida to be able to pray over the loudspeaker prior to kickoff. As these stories remind us, religious liberty impacts every area of our life, including sports. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
You can learn how to protect religious freedom in the workplace, public schools, your church, the military, and more by downloading First Liberty's free Religious Liberty Protection Kits at firstliberty.org. That's firstliberty.org. If you want hope for religious freedom, go to firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and around the round table, Allie, Beth, Stuckey, and Nick Pitts. And we mentioned the book, The Vanishing American Adult, and I was just waiting to see if he would go on a tour, because then if he would be in studio, that'd be a lot of fun. If not, we'll get Senator Ben Sasse by phone. We've just been kind of waiting to see what happens there. But near the end of this particular article, he says, although it's not universally fair, millennials have acquired a collective reputation as needy, undisciplined, coddled, presumptuous, and lacking much of a filter between their public personas and their inner lives. And he says, as one New York Times story about millennials in the workplace put it, managers struggle with their young employees' sense of entitlement, a tendency to overshare on social media, and frankness verging on insubordination. So he says, what's the alternative? Can you give us any thoughts about that? Is that a fair description? Of course, he points out that it's not universal by any means, but is that something that maybe some of you around the table want to speak to?
Yeah. unless Nick wants to
No, I'll
speak
be frank enough to say you can go first.
Well, thank you so much. I do think it's an issue, at least collectively, that millennials deal with. Now, I know plenty of millennials like Nick and like me who don't feel entitled. We know, and we were told growing up, that you don't deserve anything. Everything that you have needs to be worked for. But you do see, at least in the mainstream media, these college students especially who are so entitled that we talked about this earlier, that it's not just protesting for things that are unequal or unjust. You're just protesting for things that you want. And that's something that Sass really distinguishes really well. What we were just saying earlier is that he distinguishes between needs and wants and rights and desires. And that's something that my generation really skews, unfortunately. What is a right? What do you have the right to do and the right to be given? And what do you actually have to work for? And I will call out baby boomers a little bit because they were the people that raised us.
Yes.
And if you look at how generations have been consequential to the other generations, is they were the first generations that kind of experienced an economic boom in the 80s and 90s, and they gave that to us. And I know my parents would even articulate that we wanted you to have more opportunities and a better platform than we have. My parents would say, we didn't want you to start out where we started out with absolutely nothing, living in a trailer, married at 19 years old. We wanted you to have more than that. We wanted you to have a better education, more opportunities that they didn't have, which is great. But the other side of that is I also don't appreciate the value of a dollar in the work ethic the same way that they did because I just didn't have the same need. So I think that's an issue too.
Yeah, so millennials know the price of everything, but really the value of nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we can point to that. And I think it's just important for us to understand that to understand the context that millennials are going into and understand the market forces that are happening right now. Look at ESPN, look at Target, what we're saying, that inevitably the marketplace is doing what it's supposed to do, reacting. Right. And if we look at the contextually, we are at an unemployment rate that's the lowest that it's been in 16 years at 4.3%. So if millennials continue to act like petulant children that they've been characterized as, and I think there are many that are like that, the market will react, i.e. they will be, in the infamous words of Donald Trump, "ya fired." I think the market is just going to react to that because there are a number of millennials that are willing to do. There's other choices to come about from that. And so again, I think it's just going to be it's going to be interesting to see. Here's the important point. Interesting to see if there can be the development of character later on in life. Traditionally, that's been kind of in that beginning stages that you learn those kind of character traits and issues to be able to handle the success or failure as you move forward in life and move onward in your career. What it appears to be is there's no moral language. That's kind of what David Brooks talks about in The Road to Character. There's not this sense of an ability to be able to handle challenges and successes. And so will there be entities and organizations that can develop that character to be able to move forward with whatever life brings?
And I have a theory as well that the reason why the left especially kind of exacerbates and fosters this mentality, especially among young people, that you deserve everything, that you're entitled to everything, is so they can create these petulant children. Because one thing about petulant children is that they are dependent. And if you're an adult that's dependent, you don't have parents to depend on. Who do you go to? You go to the government.
Yes.
So if for the next 8 years the market denies them, basically like what you were saying, they don't get jobs, or they're just more fed up. They feel like the system isn't serving them well. If we have a Republican Congress and president for the next 8 years, it's very easy for those little snowflake millennials who just graduated from college to say, well, it's the government's fault. We need a change. I think that plays right into the Democrats' hands to create these overgrown babies that are dependent on something and just want to, depend on the government.
Yeah, completely agree. And so I think it's going to be important for us. And this is something that's important for us to understand, that this can exist on both sides of the aisle. Just as liberals can be snowflakes and can try to vie for safe places, that it can be equally as destructive for conservatives to want to have safe places and to want to feel victimized by the culture. And I think it's just important for us not necessarily to assume a mentality that's contrarian in nature, that is against everything, but because of this beautiful free experiment that we have in the U.S., to put forward ideas and words that advance the cause through not progressive as in ideology, progressive ideas that moves us towards a more perfect union, whether that's from the conservative side or whether that's from the liberal side, and allow the people to be able to voice their dissent in a way that's respectful and keeps the civility in our civilization.
Just before we run out of time, let's talk about the conservativemillennialblog.com.
Let's talk about it.
And we also have a link to your Twitter page and your Facebook page. And if people have not signed up, what kind of videos are they going to be seeing in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, so if you go to my Facebook page, that's basically where my blog lives. You can like the page, you can follow it, and then you'll see all of my videos. Now, I'll go ahead and warn you. If you see a caption, and especially if I'm sitting in my car in one of my videos, that you're like, okay, this girl is off her rocker, she's crazy, she's entitled, I am probably being sarcastic.
Yes.
Now, I do not mind if people don't understand the sarcasm. You know, sometimes they have to take a minute. Please do not comment. I get a lot of mean comments from people when they don't understand the sarcasm. That's fine. Everyone has different humor. Just be nice. That's just my little diatribe about Facebook trolling in general. But I give that, but I'm not always being sarcastic. I do 2 to 3 minute videos giving serious political commentary from a conservative perspective. Now, that said, I might criticize both sides. I might offend you at some point in our internet relationship. That's okay. Stick with me. Hopefully you like it.
So you're saying there's different types of senses of humor?
Yes. Very definitely.
Yes, and that is something
if she's
that you
in her
need
car,
to know,
you can
Nick.
know. If she's in her car, you probably know.
So you're saying that some people don't laugh at jokes that are funny?
Yeah.
No, your jokes are universally funny. If that's what you wanted me to say. If that's what you're trying to get out of
He
me.
was fishing here. He's pulling on his fishing rod.
Speaking of fishing, y'all hear about those fish that are just flopping around in Florida on the streets?
There we go.
Oh, no, sorry.
Denison Forum, the
gosh.
daily briefing. Let me just mention that yesterday your article, and you have a couple of articles, gets you into that conversation about critical thinking skills. The one today talks about why aren't American teenagers working anymore, and each day people can receive the daily briefing if they simply go to the Denison Forum or denisonforum.org, right?
Yeah, so go to denisonforum.org, and what you'll find is an opportunity to be able to sign up for kind of 2 of our main products on the cultural engagement side. One, Jim's daily article, which is just a must-read 500-word essay that really sends out every morning that takes one issue. And then you've got the daily briefing as well. That's just a number of issues that are, 1, issues that are driving the day, news stories that are driving the day, or 2, social science research and articles that I believe reveal the spirit of our day that kind of quantify some of those feelings and sentiments that we're seeing in cultural trends. As well as on the website, you'll be able to access some of our articles, which kind of take some of the issues of the day. We've just released one article that I wrote on Dear Evan Hansen, which is the 9-time nominated Tony Award winning, what will probably in all likelihood be a Tony Award winning musical, and that highlights kind of suicide and today's suicide epidemic and how does it handle that. And so it's a phenomenal show and probably a mediocre article, but nevertheless, you should go and read it.
It'd be a good one. And some of those white pages by you and Jim Dennison, very good resources. We're just simply out of time. Again, this is our Millennial Round Table, and I want to thank those on the other side of the glass helping us out today. That would be Andrew, Elisa, as well as Melissa. Have a great day. Tomorrow we have Gary Bauer and Robert Knight and John Stone Street. We'll see you then.
If you've listened for any length of time, you've probably heard about Point of View listeners who've done amazing things, started ministries, found their life's calling, impacted their city, their state, the nation. But let me be clear, you don't have to have a huge impact to be faithful. I thought about that when I read a note from Joanne in Texas. She admitted, up until recently, I've not had much of a political view, nor have I ever been so informed. But since I signed up for your email and website information, I can now get the correct information that the public is oblivious to. Joanne ended by thanking us for the Take Action section of our website, where we make it easy for you to express your views on key issues with your elected representatives. Everything we do on the air, online, through mail and email is made possible through people like you who invest in Point of View so we can invest in issues that matter. Take your place on the Truth Team. Call 1-800-347-5151 or sign up online at pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.